Even before the Tsunoda and Lawson news was made official, we already knew that Max Verstappen was not happy about Lawson being dropped because once again he felt that the driver drama at Red Bull was deflecting attention away from the real issues at the team. Generally speaking, Max has never come out and criticized any of his ex-teammates regardless of how bad they have performed, and even when Perez was struggling with the car last year, Max actually defended him. Helmut Marko in an interview confirmed that Max was against the decision, saying, "We know Max is not happy." However, he then defended the move by saying, "But we need 2 cars up front, not only for the Constructors title, but also to help Max get his 5th world title, then you can strategically achieve more in races." Max, however, made his position crystal clear on social media when he liked a post by fellow F1 Dutch driver Guido van der Garde on Instagram, in which Guido was actually pretty punchy against Red Bull, using phrases like that they were bullying Lawson and also crushing his spirit. That tells you everything you need to know about Max's position on the decision, and even though he has a contract with Red Bull until 2028, it just feels like now, every single day with Red Bull's performance continuing to decline, it seems more and more likely that Max is going to leave at some point, and to me, it is almost the question of not if he is going to leave the team, but when is he going to leave the team, and what will it take to finally push him over the edge? Before we get into this video, however, I want to say a quick word about the sponsor of today's video, CyberGhost VPN. 38 million people trust CyberGhost to help them connect them to servers all around the world that allows them to access geo-blocked content that is being taken away from you. So for example, when I was on holiday in Japan last year and wanted to keep up with all of my favorite shows that I was watching, I found out that most of them had been blocked outside of the UK. Using CyberGhost, in just a few clicks you can unblock all of the videos and TV shows that you want to watch on sites like YouTube, Amazon Prime, Netflix and others that are being geo-blocked from anywhere in the world. CyberGhost also protects your data from hackers and data brokers that want to sell your information online. All you need is one CyberGhost account that can be used on up to 7 different devices, and by using my link in the description, you can get 84% off CyberGhost VPN as well as 4 months completely free, and on top of that there is also a 45-day money-back guarantee if you decide to change your mind. So once again, a big thank you to CyberGhost VPN. We know that the problems at Red Bull basically stretch back all the way to 2023, where, despite them dominating the season, we already started to see little signs, especially around street tracks, where the car just had these instability and balance issues, which Max did try to highlight for the team, but it was very difficult to hear them as he was winning every single race, and it just feels like despite how dominant the team was, they didn't take Max as seriously as they should have. Mercedes and Ferrari, let's not forget, continued to develop their failed 2022 concepts. McLaren only just started to kind of become contenders at the front of the grid, and so the entire 2023 season, as impressive as it was, it kind of lured Red Bull into a false sense of security. In 2024, however, that basically hit critical mass. The power struggle inside of the team with the Horner investigation, Jos Verstappen saying that Horner was tearing the team apart, Adrian Newey deciding to leave, and then Max publicly saying that if Helmut Marko goes, then he would go as well, basically all divided the team. However, the thing that started to paper over all of those cracks was Red Bull's dominant start to 2024, because as long as Red Bull kept producing a more competitive car than the other teams, then all of those external factors, as bad as they were, kind of didn't really matter. However, over the course of 24, as McLaren, Mercedes and Ferrari all started to become more competitive, and as Red Bull, especially around Hungary, started to get more and more lost in their development, Toto also started to get a little bit braver, talking openly about Max potentially leaving Red Bull for Mercedes. And at that point, Max leaving Red Bull didn't just become realistic, but also justifiable given the trajectory of Red Bull compared to the other teams. Red Bull's car troubles have continued into 2025. Fundamentally, their car has plenty of downforce and it's not necessarily a bad car, but similar to the Ferrari, it has a very narrow operating window. It requires a very good feel and a lot of confidence between the braking and steering transition going into slow speed corners, so as to not induce that mid-corner understeer that Max hates. Max has been able to handle that instability so far, but when it comes to a driver like Lawson, due to his inexperience and the difficulty of his situation and the pressure that he was under, he was essentially scapegoated and booted out of the team for underperforming, much to Max's frustration. Adrian Newey leaving in 2024, in my opinion, has got to have had some kind of effect on the team getting lost with their development, and I think that it was very interesting that Christian Horner in China specifically made a point to praise the quality of their technical team, which to me was not a coincidence. Pierre Vacher, I think, is very soon going to come under a lot of pressure inside of the team, and he openly admitted that the team didn't make the step that they wanted to going into 2025. The Lawson and Tsunoda driver change on top of the car issues just continues to highlight the incompetence of the Horner-Marko leadership, and for a team which is trying to convince Max that they are not in decline and that they will continue to be competitive, it must be getting very, very difficult for Max to keep having confidence in this team. Just to underline the situation that Red Bull find themselves in, after 2 races, if you magically removed Max from the championship, Red Bull would currently be last in the Constructors' Championship, and even worse, they wouldn't have a single other driver who they could put in that car who'd be able to drive it. That is the position that Red Bull have put themselves with their mismanagement and poor decision making. Something else that I think is quite worrying is that, regardless of how good Max has been, in a way I think he and Red Bull have almost been flattered a little bit so far in the first 2 races, because as Antonelli is going to improve every single race, and as I'm sure his results are going to get better, and once Ferrari stop sabotaging its own drivers with incompetence, I expect that both Ferrari and Mercedes are going to improve and kind of fulfill more of their potential, which is only going to make it even more difficult for Red Bull as the season progresses. This then kind of begs the question of where exactly is the value in this team? Because with no Adrian Newey, apart from Max, who is their talisman either on or off the track that brings them competitiveness and also credibility for the future? Ultimately, their indecision over their drivers, which has only injected instability into this team, has brought them to where they are now. They said no to experienced drivers like Sainz, Hamilton and Alonso. They said yes to Ricciardo, but then he was beaten by Tsunoda, which made him a non-viable option. They said no to Tsunoda because of his mentality for the past 2 years, but all of a sudden, over the course of 2 races, he now has completely changed as a driver in the eyes of Helmut Marko. They kind of said yes to Liam Lawson, but never really backed him with the right preparation or then gave him enough time to turn things around. And then with Sergio Perez, they basically had no clue what to do with him. Whilst he was at the team, they were already lining up drivers to replace him, whilst at the same time giving him a pseudo-contract extension to make it look as if they had confidence in him. Those kind of mixed messages just reek of an organization who basically has no clue what to do. And now, I am not saying that driver choices are easy for any team in Formula 1, especially when you have to pair up a driver with Max Verstappen, but compared it to the other top teams, if their kind of established older driver left the team, if Lando left McLaren, then they would still have Piastri. If George Russell left Mercedes, then they would still have Kimi Antonelli. And even though Lewis Hamilton is not the established driver, if he was to leave Ferrari, they would still have Charles Leclerc. Now, Ferrari in this example is a bit of an outlier because they went for an all-out superstar driver lineup, but in terms of those other teams, they created a succession plan. They went after the absolute best young driver that they could find. They gave them the right opportunity or developed them in the best possible way to get the most out of their talents. Red Bull just do not have a succession plan, and they have continuously over the last half decade failed to find drivers and develop them in the right way. They just have a bunch of talented drivers who they have absolutely no idea what to do with, and also drivers that they don't really trust. Lawson was dropped after 2 races, Tsunoda was called mentally incapable for 2 years, and Hadjar was called an embarrassment by Helmut Marko after his very first Formula 1 race. In general, I think the incentives for Max to stay at Red Bull are kind of beginning to wear thin beyond just loyalty and the legacy of basically being a one driver, one team kind of person. If he wanted to leave at the end of 2025, I think the team would have to collapse and fall consistently behind the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari, which isn't entirely impossible, because behind the McLarens on any given day, 1/10 could separate Russell, Antonelli, Verstappen, Hamilton and Leclerc in a qualifying or practice session. So much I think this season is going to come down to the smallest of details between those 3 teams, with things like track characteristics, the immediate impact of upgrade packages, the weather, and also tyre preferences all coming into the equation. For him to want to leave at the end of 2026, however, I think is going to be entirely dependent on Red Bull's power unit program. To me, this is the most likely option because I think Max is going to give Red Bull the benefit of the doubt, and he is going to give them 2026 to see how things play out with the new aero rules and also their brand new power units. Even though in 2026 we are staying with the same basic ground effect concept, there is still a lot of significant changes. The underfloor and front wings are being reduced, and there's also the introduction of the active aero, and Red Bull will have to balance the new aero changes with running their brand new power unit for the very first time. I think it's fair to say that if Max Verstappen came on the Formula 1 market, it would basically be like a free-for-all in terms of which team he'd want to go to. Having said that, the alternatives and getting the timing right for Max is still a little bit tricky. Ferrari is the only team that I think wouldn't be an option for Max because Hamilton is already there for the next couple of years, and alongside Leclerc, I just do not see that as a compatible teammate partnership. Aston Martin is the one that everyone is talking about, and I'm sure that the Newey and Honda factors are also very enticing, but it just feels like unless he wants to be committed to them for the next 3, 4 or 5 years and kind of do what Lewis did with Mercedes in 2013 in building up an upper midfield team to become title contenders, the timing is just not right yet. McLaren and Mercedes, however, are the intriguing ones. Now, if Max came calling, I think that Zach Brown would have a pretty uncomfortable question to answer in terms of who would he drop, Lando or Oscar. Oscar has just signed a contract extension, and even though Lando has a contract beyond 2025, which presumably is going to end in 2026, I am sure that he's going to try to negotiate some kind of Verstappen clause to protect him from being dropped. As far as Mercedes, I mean, Toto has made his position very clear in basically admitting that anyone would do handstands to sign Max Verstappen, but once again, that uncomfortable question is, given how good George Russell has started the season, he would still be the one surely to get dropped, with Antonelli being kept on alongside Verstappen. And now it's important to mention that Verstappen and Horner have both tried to reiterate their commitment to one another, with Horner saying that Max is working harder than ever before to try and help solve Red Bull's issues, and Max has also tried to push aside the idea of him leaving when the team is struggling. However, what drivers say in the media and also in front of their own team is not always the reality of what they're thinking inside of their head. Max is the only piece of string holding this team together, and he knows that now more than ever, he has to show leadership and confidence in front of the media in the trust that he has in them to basically maintain their morale. But if this does continue to deteriorate in 2025 and then especially into 2026, is he really going to ride the Titanic all the way to the bottom of the ocean for the next 4 years of his career, purely out of loyalty to the team? Max has reiterated on multiple occasions that he has racing ambitions outside of Formula 1 and that he is not going to be here for the next 10 or so years like a Russell, Norris or Leclerc, who all still have more to prove and more to achieve. Or what does Max have left to prove? There is still the possibility that Red Bull just get it all right, and that Max does continue at the team if they can give him a car that can challenge for wins and championships over the next 4 or so years. However, looking at the cracks that started to form in the car development and then also the internal team politics, which in my opinion are only going to continue to get worse, to me once again the question is not is Max going to leave Red Bull, but what will be the trigger point and what opportunity is going to entice him to get him out of Red Bull eventually. Well, there you have it. Once again, a big thank you to CyberGhost VPN for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check out my link to get a very exclusive discount. And once again, a big thank you to CyberGhost VPN. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, that would be massively appreciated. And I'll see you in the next one.